Here's Ben Shapiro's advice about how to have a bad faith debate with someone.
Why should you debate somebody on the left? And when should you debate somebody on the left? The truth is, you shouldn't always debate people on the left. When you're on college campuses, there are really only a few reasons to debate anyone on the left in the first place. The first is that you are forced to under the rules of the classroom for some odd reason. The second is because they're serving you food, which is a high likelihood, and they're going to spit in it unless you talk politics with them.
Don't you hate it when you're at a restaurant and the person who comes to your table insists upon having a political debate with you while they're taking your order? I know that this is something that happens to me all the time.
And the only other reason is if the person happens to be an honest leftist. You found the one honest leftist in America, congratulations, it's unlikely. So the only other reason that you should ever have a conversation or be friends with anyone on the left is, and not even be friends, is if you are in public in front of a large audience, and then your goal is to humiliate them as badly as possible.
So if you encounter an honest person, the proper response, according to Ben, is to have an entirely dishonest, bad faith debate with them. Don't you dare have a magnanimous discussion about the issues in which you're open to the possibility that you're wrong. No, the only debate you should be having is one that you can turn into a performance, the purpose of which is to make the other person look bad, regardless of what your respective positions are or whose are genuinely better justified. This dude keeps asking Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to debate him. She, of course, has repeatedly ignored or turned down such requests. Ben's supporters repeatedly and disingenuously ask why it is that she won't take Ben up on his offer to have what he explicitly admits would only be a bad faith performative pseudo-debate, the sole purpose of which would be to try to humiliate her in front of an audience.
That is the goal of the conversation. The goal is not to convince the person. The goal is not to make friends with that person. If you want to make friends with the person, there's a whole different conversation you can have. But the conversations that are going to make the most difference on campus are the ones where you're in public, in front of large groups of people, or with a camera nearby, and your goal then is to make these people look as bad as possible, to unmask them before the world. That is the goal. Which sounds harsh until you realize that that's what they're doing to you each and every day.
Ben hates being unmasked each and every day. Maybe because Ben gets pwned and made to look ridiculous in debates on a daily basis, he infers that simply making a person look foolish is the whole point of a debate. This is one of the bigger reasons I myself haven't really done any debates. If I'm going to argue with someone about something, I want to learn about their position and honestly articulate why I disagree in the hope of coming to a better understanding of the nature of the disagreement. If I disagree with someone's position, sometimes it's because I don't understand why they hold it. Learning about what another person really thinks and why they think it is best done when not in front of an audience. Because in front of an audience, there's greater pressure to try to save face if you're corrected about something. I love watching debates, but one must keep in mind that their value is primarily as entertainment. For Ben, however, a debate is primarily a propaganda performance.
And that takes us to the second rule, which is you must frame your opponent. Okay, this is something that people on the right don't like to do, because by nature we're sort of nice, gentle, easygoing folk with families and lives, and this is not our first priority.
Yes, when I think of conservatives, especially Trump supporters, I think of nice, kind, gentle folks.
So your goal is to attack their character. And this is something people on the right get really shy about. Right? We don't like to do it because it's not nice. Well, tough. Do it.
Of course, it's not simply not nice, it's mendacious. To frame someone or their argument in the worst possible way is to take a big giant shit all over the principle of charity. And how does Ben justify this? With a tu quoque fallacy. The left does it, so Ben claims, therefore it's okay for conservatives to do it.
So rights are good, and they say education is a right. That means education is good. And you want to deprive these poor kids of education? Instead of arguing education is a right, you should ask a very basic question. Why is it okay for you to steal other people's money?
This, I think, is one of the fundamental moral differences between the left and conservatives. They believe, or at least they talk as though they believe, that nothing can ever justify taking money from someone who can easily afford to part with it. Confiscating money from millionaires and billionaires is, to them, worse than letting poor folks go without education. Some will say it's worse than even letting them go hungry. Some conservatives even oppose the law that says the hospital can't turn you away if you can't show an ability to pay your bill. To them, wheeling a dying person's stretcher out the door of a hospital and leaving them to die is not as bad as forcing that hospital to provide services that the person may never be able to pay for. Now, I don't know if Ben would go that far, although given his views on healthcare, I wouldn't be surprised. But suffice it to say that he does think that letting someone go without education is worse than raising taxes on those who can most easily afford it. I don't need to use ugly language to make that look bad. To me and many other people, that looks bad enough on its own.
What makes you morally superior that you get to steal other people's money?
The fact that I'm taking it from those who can most easily afford it and spending it on educating people, which benefits everyone.
Your useless major in ancient Greek economics is of no concern to me.
This is a disingenuous argument because I doubt Ben would approve of giving people free education even if it only went to medical and engineering students or to some other discipline that he sees as valuable. Pointing to degrees that people take primarily out of interest rather than practicality is a red herring. This is another logical fallacy Ben uses in his How to Debate book. The fact that not every degree has a clear benefit to society is not a relevant argument against subsidizing post-secondary education in general.
When people say, the 1% will pay for it, the answer shouldn't be, well, the 1% won't be able to afford it, because that's assuming their morality. It's okay to take money from the 1%.
The reason why your rebuttal shouldn't be the 1% can't afford it is not because it assumes the morality of taking from the 1%. The reason this ought not be your rebuttal is because it's false. There are countries with universities that don't charge tuition, and they fund them with progressive taxation. They don't seem to have any problem affording them.
The answer should be, what makes you think it is okay to steal money from people, period?
For a moment, let's set aside the issue of whether Ben is actually talking about theft. He is, by his own admission, framing the issue in the least charitable way he can, but let's run with it for a minute. I don't think even Ben thinks that it's never okay to take anything from anybody ever. But he's talking like he thinks it doesn't matter if it's to save someone's life, and certainly doesn't matter if it is to facilitate a better educated population. How would the world be better off, on the whole, if it operated under this principle?
Do you just get to rob people's houses? Is this your thing?
No, democratically administered taxation is not the same as just robbing people's houses. This is not just an uncharitable framing of the issue, it is an outright dishonest framing of it.
When you're arguing with people on the left, it's even worse. What they will do is they'll throw out red herrings.
Which Ben openly advocates doing.
Say, do you believe in climate change? Are you a climate denier? Like, no, I don't deny the climate, it exists. Right? Do you believe in climate change? Well, yes, the climate changes. What are you talking about? Would you like to get more specific?
So another Ben Shapiro tip is, pointlessly pretend to be an ignoramus. Ben knows what these questions about climate change are intended to discover.
Now, do you know, for example, what percentage of human activity is responsible for the rise in climate? Do you have any clue?
Why does that matter? Why ought we not be concerned with any degree of warming for which we are responsible? Even if drastic changes will only slightly decrease the probability of total civilizational collapse, don't you think they're worth considering?
What we would have to do in order to minimize human activity so as to go back to the amounts of carbon that were being sent into the atmosphere before the industrial age? Is that something that you're willing to? How many people are you willing to let die? How many people are you willing to impoverish?
Most global warming activists seem to want to prioritize cutting emissions from folks who can most easily do so. Focus on the least vulnerable populations, and that will minimize the total hardship produced by cutting emissions. Ben seems to think that the only effective political solution to climate change is to turn the clock back to the 19th century technologically, but offers no evidence or argument that this is really the case. Also, by the way, this is not an answer to the question of whether he does or does not believe in climate change, the question to which he's imagining himself responding.
Final point when it comes to arguing with the left and defeating them. And this is, body language really counts a lot. Body language is huge. Very few Republicans actually understand the necessities of body language. One of the reasons Marco Rubio is so popular right now is because his body language is tremendous. He's got really good body language.
To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.